Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar through 30 Forward. This is our third one. We're very excited to have you here and have guest speakers with us as well. So moderating the sessions today, we have our Research Advisory Council. So our co-chairs, Dr. Craig Bunnell and Dr. Kirk Luther. With that, I'm actually going to hand it right over to them to begin today's session.
Excellent. Thanks, Victoria. Welcome, everyone. Glad you could make the time. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce today's webinar, Developing and Implementing an Evidence-Based Policing Unit, Strategies for Success. We have two amazing presenters today. I'll briefly introduce them, but they're going to describe their background in a little bit more detail for all of you. We have Acting Sergeant Melissa Wighton with the London Police Service's Evidence-Based Policing Unit. And then we have Sarah Harmer, who I've known for a long time, who is the Supervisor of Crime and Research, also with the London Police Service Evidence-Based Policing Unit. So they're going to talk about their experiences developing the unit with the London Police Service and some strategies for success. I believe that they've done an incredible job at the London Police Service. I think they're doing amazing things, and there's a lot that all of us can learn from their experiences and their wisdom. So thank you so much, Melissa and Sarah, for joining us today. Just for folks joining us, please, as we go through, if you have any questions that you would like to ask the presenters, please put it in the chat or the Q&A, and Kirk and I will see those, and I will moderate the questions after the presentation is over. We're planning for the presentation to last for about 40 minutes, and then we will deal with the Q&As. Again, I'll moderate that and pose your questions to the presenters. So we'll wait till the end to do that. If there is any clarifying questions where something being said is confusing, again, post those as well, and I'll interrupt the speakers to clarify those issues for you. So with all that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Melissa and Sarah. Thanks again for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you to 30 Forward for the opportunity to speak to you about all things EBP today. I think a good place to start us off would be to tell you a bit about us. So I'll go first. My name is Melissa Wighton. Everyone calls me Missy. I have been with the London Police Service for 17 years, and I've spent the last 2.5 years in our evidence-based policing unit, where I am currently an acting sergeant. I recently obtained my master's in applied criminology and police management from the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom. And it was really this educational opportunity, coupled with my experience as an officer, which really serves as the foundation for my growth and development into evidence-based policing, or EBP. That's what you're frequently going to hear us refer to it today. So a bit about our city and our police service, just for context. So London, Ontario has a population of just over 500,000, and that makes us the 5th largest municipality in Ontario and the 11th largest in Canada. Our police service has about 1,000 members, so 800 sworn and 200 civilian staff, and we primarily operate out of one centrally located headquarters. Sarah, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Missy. So my name is Sarah Harmer, and I've been with the London Police Service for just under 7 years. Since joining in 2019, I've been involved with the evidence-based policing unit in an informal capacity to start. I was initially hired as a crime analyst within the uniform division. However, with the formalization of the EBPU and the alignment with my academic background, I transitioned into an analyst role within the unit. And more recently, I successfully applied for promotion to the role of Crime and Research Supervisor within the unit. And I've been in this position for about 6 months. In terms of education, I hold a master's degree from Carleton University. I completed my thesis under our moderator, under the supervision of Dr. Craig Bunnell in the Police Research Lab. And I also hold an undergraduate degree in psychology from Wilfrid Laurier University, which I completed under the research specialization stream, which basically means I take a lot of stats classes.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. So, whether you have an established knowledge already of evidence-based policing, or this is the first time you are hearing about it, we feel it's important to begin with the why. So, why do we do this work, and why do we feel it is so important to come to speak to you today about this topic? And so, policing is one of society's most critical functions. Every day, we make decisions that can profoundly affect someone's life and sometimes forever. And so, because the stakes are so high, at times, even life or death, it's our duty to ensure those decisions are the right ones. And so, it's no surprise then that the public often asks this very legitimate question: why did the police do that? And evidence based policing helps us answer that question. It provides a framework for understanding the impact of our actions, evaluating the decisions we make, and identifying opportunities for improvement when change is needed. But recognizing that we have a very diverse audience in attendance today, which is amazing, coming from all different backgrounds, Sarah is going to go through an explanation of EBP and some core principles.
Perfect. Thank you, Missy. So what is evidence-based policing, or EBP as Missy mentioned, we frequently call it? So EBP means evaluating which strategies work best to reduce crime, increase public safety, and maintain positive relationships and community trust. The key is to ensure that decisions are backed by research, data, and analysis. And evidence can come from a variety of sources, such as academic studies, official crime statistics, or even public feedback, and those are just to name a few. And so, how is evidence actually created? And for that, we turn to using the scientific methods for hypothesis testing. I like to joke that if you think back to like your grade 5 science class, this is kind of where you learned about the hypothesis formation. But one of the best examples of creating evidence through rigorous testing is from evidence-based medicine. In evidence-based medicine, randomized control trials are considered the gold standard, and they're often used to assess medicines and vaccines. Individuals with symptoms or illnesses test a treatment by changing just one variable at a time. So, for example, in drug trials, if you're testing something like a new allergy medication, one group takes the new medication and the other does not. They're usually given a placebo. Groups are balanced and controlled to be as similar as possible on variables such as gender and age, and then outcomes are evaluated to find significant differences between the groups, such as side effects, reduction in symptoms, adverse reactions, and even things like death. So all drugs must go through this scientifically rigorous process before reaching the market. And this should also be the goal for evidence-based policing, to follow a similar approach, aiming for practices to be tested before and during implementation. And this would ensure that the way that we deliver policing is done in a way that is best for both the community and police officers. Evidence-based policing was inspired by evidence-based medicine, and so it's important as well to touch on the history of that. So EBP was first proposed by criminologist and professor Dr. Lawrence Sherman in 1998. He coined the term and has been actively researching, experimenting, and teaching EBP since then. It emerged in the early 2000s and was influenced by the broader evidence-based movement in healthcare and social sciences. And because of the growing acceptance in other fields, Dr. Lawrence Sherman championed the idea that police strategies should also be based on what works. So the roots of EBP can be traced back even earlier, back to the 1970s with the famous Kansas City Preventative Patrol experiment, and it's just sort of developed since then. And while not all police agencies adopted EBP right away, its momentum has continued to grow over time, supported by academic institutions, government grants, and increasing buy-in from police leaders and police agencies. So, as I mentioned, there was an initial slow acceptance of EBP, and there are still many hurdles. Most often, the biggest hurdle is tradition, as many practices are passed through generations and change can be hard, just like Grumpy Cat in the picture says. So, EBP seeks to question some of those traditions, pausing, stepping back, and asking, but is this actually the best way? Additionally, some of the hurdles to EBP can be caused by a misunderstanding of what EBP is and also what it isn't. And so this slide is about clarifying What is evidence-based policing and what is it not? To start, evidence-based policing is not the same as problem-oriented policing, or often referred to as POP. So POP is an operational framework that focuses on identifying and addressing underlying problems, and we use the SARA model. Sadly, it was not named after me, and if it was, it's missing the H. But this model stands for scanning, analysis, response, and assessment. It is structured in a way to diagnose the root cause and respond to issues in policing. And EBP doesn't replace the SARA process. Instead, it strengthens it by asking what research tells us about similar problems and by emphasizing the importance of evaluating whether our responses actually work. POP falls under the EBP umbrella, but it is not the same. Similarly, EBP is not the same as data-driven policing. Data-driven policing approaches rely heavily on just internal data, such as crime statistics and trends to guide decisions. And while this is critical, it only tells us what is happening. EBP goes further by incorporating external research and evidence to help determine what is likely to be effective in response to what is happening. It's also distinct from community policing, which is a practice that is centered on building relationships and trust within the community. EBP doesn't replace that. It can actually enhance community policing by helping us understand which engagement strategies are the most effective. More broadly, EBP is not a rigid one-size-fits-all approach, and it is not the only tool available to us. It doesn't override professional experience or judgment, it just complements them. So I said what it isn't, so what is it? Again, at its core, EBP is a tool and a lens for better decision making. It brings together multiple elements: data, research, practitioner experience, and evaluation. And it encourages us to assess the outcomes, not to just implement initiatives. Ultimately, it's an approach or a mindset, one that emphasizes researching, testing, and continuously improving, rather than relying solely on tradition or intuition. And importantly, evidence-based policing is not a replacement for officer experience or intuition, and it is meant to complement it. Dr. Jerry Ratcliffe, a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, often describes this through the concept of the copper's nose, which reflects the intuition, experience, and knowledge that officers develop over time on the job. However, Ratcliffe emphasizes that this intuition alone should not drive decision-making. Instead, it should be used alongside evidence-based approaches. So while an officer's instincts may help identify emerging issues or potential hotspots, those insights should be supported and confirmed using data and research. And so how do we ensure we are supporting things with data and research properly? Well, we often use the triple T. Evidence-based policing is often organized into this triple T framework developed by Dr. Sherman in 2013, which gives us a consistent method to approach problems. The first step is targeting, which is identifying and prioritizing a specific policing issue. So that could be a crime hotspot or an organizational challenge such as staffing. The second step is testing. When we implement and assess an intervention to see if it has an impact, such as testing hotspot patrols versus random patrol. Lastly, we have tracking, which is the most often overstepped step, which focuses on tracking outputs and measuring outcomes over time to determine whether the strategy worked and should be continued, modified, or stopped. By following this framework, it helps to ensure our projects and decisions are focused, evidence-based, and continuously improving. When it comes to applying the triple T and implementing EBP, we turn to our 2025 highlight reel. So this could possibly spark some interest and get your mind turning to how EBP could help in your organization. Each of these items on the screen are things that we were asked about in 2025, and this is not an exhaustive list. Some of these initiatives involved our office from the onset of the project, while others, much like Kramer bursting into Jerry's apartment in the image here, arrived with little or no warning and tended to be very last minute and urgent. Regardless, we always aim to support every request in some capacity, no matter the timing, the source, the size, or the scope. And that brings us to the question of what does an evidence-based policing unit do and how can we help? So, a big part of our work involves identifying problem areas or gaps where evidence-based practices could add value. This means looking at areas where current methods may not be producing the best outcomes or where a more data-informed approach could improve results. So, for example, this could include examining community policing strategies, response times, or existing crime prevention approaches. From there, we focus on initiating research, developing ideas, and exploring strategies to address these gaps. Most of our work is done completely internally. This includes encouraging new ideas grounded in evidence, and we draw on many sources such as academic research, other agencies, other fields, and new programs. Another important component is consulting with internal units to integrate evidence-based ideas into operation. So this involves working closely with teams across the organization, drawing on their different expertise and experience. At the same time, we conduct in-depth analysis of ongoing initiatives to assess whether they are actually achieving their intended goals. Using measures such as crime trends, calls for service, officer satisfaction, community satisfaction, and more, and then making adjustments when needed. Lastly, we communicate and work with other police services and academic partners to support collaboration, share findings, and bring in new and different perspectives. By working with others, we can improve our internal practices and the broader field of evidence-based policing. So if these are the ways in which we can help, how do we actually do that? And for that, I turn it back over to Missy.
Thanks, Sarah. So you may be asking yourself, how do you take these foundational EBP principles and put them into action? So to help assist with that, we are going to move on to operationalizing an evidence-based policing unit, providing strategies for success in developing and implementing your own EBPU, or if you are already doing this type of work, tips for how you can scale it up. Disclaimer, these are our perspectives based on our experience, but we are only one police service and one municipality, and we certainly aren't selling this as a one-size-fits-all solution to implementing an EBPU. So to start us off, let's take a little trip down memory lane, starting with the inception of the LPS EPBU. So the Patrol Modernization Project began in 2019 as a pilot initiative. And at that time, the work was led by a single sworn member who was completing the master's program at the University of Cambridge. And her focus included areas such as call times and sector deployment. When Sarah then joined as the uniform crime analyst later in 2019, she became increasingly involved in supporting the analytical components of the project, including assisting with the members' thesis work and contributing to these broader operational initiatives. And so as the unit grew by adding more sworn members, its scope expanded beyond patrol-focused work to support other areas across the organization. And so this evolution led to the discussion about whether the unit would be better positioned within the corporate structure to allow for more consistent service-wide support. So ultimately, in 2023, the unit transitioned from a pilot project to a fully formalized full-time unit. And in 2025, we added the civilian supervisor position. And at the end of the month, we will be adding our first evidence-based policing analyst, which is very exciting for us. Now, if we look at present day, currently, our evidence-based policing unit is embedded within the corporate services division. As I said, that's where we still sit, and we report directly to an inspector. We are currently a 5-member team. Sometimes that number fluctuates, but we have 5 members right now, 3 sworn and 2 civilian. All members have to apply and be successful to be transferred to this unit. And that's really key, is we need people that are passionate about the work and not individuals who are voluntold to come here. So our civilian staff are permanent members who follow the internal civilian hiring process. And then our sworn members are chosen out of a pool of individuals who have submitted a formal application to transfer to the EBPU, with the final selection process resting with the executive command team. The sworn members eventually transfer out of this unit with the purpose of them taking their EBP knowledge and extending it elsewhere in the organization. So collectively, Sarah and I oversee the unit, guiding project development and implementation. And as you can see from our history, our placement in the organization has evolved. And the current designation in corporate has served us well, but it also comes with several layers of governance that can, at times, delay productivity because so many eyes have to review and approve a strategy before we can get it up and running. So this has resulted in us oftentimes meeting directly with the chief, as there is a level of respect and understanding that we are the subject matter experts on this topic in our organization, and he actively seeks our input on certain projects. So having learned all of these lessons, looking ahead, there is the potential for our unit to align closer to the chief, reducing those number of layers between us and senior decision makers, which will create an opportunity for more direct engagement and faster impact. And we just tell you that is kind of food for thought when you're thinking about implementing your own EBP and where that would lay in your organizational chart. Our movement and our progression, we feel, emphasizes the strategic importance of EBP at LPS, as it's giving us that vertical momentum, both top down and bottom up. And this allows EBP practices to be more firmly embedded into the organizational culture. So then if we look more closely at our team, one of the keys to our success is the mix of sworn and civilian members. And we feel really passionate about this one. I can't tell you how many times in a day I turn my chair around to ask Sarah a question and vice versa. We rely on each other constantly. We have different lenses and experiences, and therefore we bring diversity of thought to the unit. Our sworn members bring this operational knowledge and credibility amongst their peers. They know how policing works on the ground, how investigations are conducted, and how information flows through reports and record management systems. More importantly, which I just touched on, is that they bring with them these established relationships. We have noticed that sometimes sworn members are more comfortable approaching another sworn member, and they share this history, right? You go to college together, you work on the road, you go to tough calls. It kind of taps into that brother and sisterhood of policing, which we can then leverage and tap into to help promote EBP further in the organization. Civilian members bring different but equally valuable strengths. At times, I think, a greater strength. They have research and analytical skills, professional and academic expertise, and networks outside of policing. And they approach problems from a different angle, ask questions that might not occur to those who are immersed in the day-to-day operations, and they provide the evidence and the data to back up recommendations. So together, the combination of these perspectives ensures that the work we do is grounded in evidence, but also practicable and actionable, which is so key. Together, the combination of these perspectives, like, we really think it is so key. If you're thinking about where you're going to line, one of our number one suggestions would be to have that mixture of sworn and civilian members. And so once you establish the parameters of your team, you have to pivot to implementation of EBP. And you have to be able to bridge the gap between knowing and doing. Because one of the biggest challenges in evidence-based policing isn't necessarily finding the evidence, it's putting it into practice. We can have strong research and proven approaches, but implementation is often where the real work begins, because let me tell you, implementation hurdles are real. We have seen the dragon turned into that little computer-generated dinosaur many a time. We had an officer come in this morning who's working on a really interesting road safety section project, and he's having a hard time with this, exactly getting officers to do what they're asked to. And so it's like, how do we help bridge that gap? And that's why training and communication are so important. It's not enough to tell people what the evidence says. Remember, skepticism may exist and organizational inertia can slow adoption. One thing we've learned over the years is that we can talk about evidence-based policing all we want, but if people across the organization don't understand what it is, why it matters, and how it applies to their day-to-day work, it's hard to build any real momentum. Alternatively, when people understand the rationale behind a change and feel equipped to implement it, adoption becomes much smoother. And so, how do you start to propel EBP forward? How do you gain traction? You provide training. So, the slide in front of you highlights some of the training our team has delivered in recent years. Those are pictures from some of those training groups. One of the biggest educational opportunities we have undertaken is onboarding all our new recruits, special constables, cadets, and auxiliary officers with a 3-hour training block on EBP. We feel if you can introduce evidence-based thinking at the very start of someone's career, it simply becomes part of how they approach policing. It isn't seen as some new initiative or extra layer of work. It's just how they learn to think about problems and make decisions. But what about existing members? Many have years or decades of experience long before EBP was part of the conversation. And so to reach them, we deliver training at multiple levels, from frontline officers to mid-level managers. Recently, we introduced procedural justice training across the organization, teaching how authorities earn legitimacy through fair, respectful, and transparent interactions. Every single member of our organization, sworn and civilian, got procedural justice training in 2025. We then reinforce those concepts further through our coach officer program, where we also do education on and assist, and we connect procedural justice to organizational justice, self-legitimacy, and leadership. And what all of this has taught us is that training is essential. It builds awareness, it builds understanding, and it builds capability. One accomplishment we're particularly proud of is the opportunity to support other police services that are looking to advance evidence-based policing within their own organizations. Most recently, we were invited to deliver a 2-day training program for the Niagara Regional Police Service, which was amazing. For us, that's what this work is all about. Police services learning from and supporting one another. It's a collective effort, and we're always happy to share what we've learned along the way. And we have also been the recipients of that kindness as well. The Barrie Police Service and their evidence-based policing unit has been a consistent sounding board for us in the EBP world, and we've really felt their support as well. But training alone doesn't create change. For evidence-based policing to influence how an organization operates, you need to create demand for it. One of the realities of starting a new evidence-based policing unit, like any new function within an organization, is you have to earn credibility and demonstrate your value. So EBP is not what I would consider like the sexy side of policing. If that's what you're looking for, I'm super sorry to burst your bubble. It's not ERS, K9, or major crime, where the demand and respect for those units already exists. When it comes to EBP, you will need to create the demand for it. And early on, that means saying yes to opportunities and getting involved wherever you can. Not every project is going to be a major organizational initiative. And honestly, that's okay. Some of the best opportunities come from the smaller projects because they give you a chance to show people what you bring to the table. Our philosophy has always been pretty simple. Make it more valuable to have us involved than not involved. And sometimes that means producing a report that's clear, concise, and easy for decision makers to understand. Sometimes it'll mean identifying trends or patterns that weren't obvious before. And sometimes it's as simple as helping a team think through how they're going to measure success before they launch an initiative. One thing we've learned is that police officers are often very good at identifying problems and developing solutions. They'll say, okay, here's the issue, and here's what we're going to do about it. What doesn't always happen naturally is the conversation about how will we know if this worked? And that's where we can add value. We help teams think about outcomes from the very beginning. What does success look like? What are we trying to achieve? What should we be measuring? And how are we going to know whether the initiative had the impact we hoped it would? When you consistently provide that kind of practical support, people start to see the benefit. And over time, you build a reputation as a resource that can help projects succeed and not as a group that creates extra work. And that's when things start to change. Instead of having to convince people to involve you, they begin reaching out on their own, and the demand for evidence-based policing starts to grow. But to succeed, you also need allies. You need people in positions of influence who understand it, believe in it, and are willing to advocate for it. You need champions at the decision-making table and people who ensure your unit is part of the conversation when important decisions are being made. And for us, those advocates have been absolutely critical to our growth. One of the strongest champions of evidence-based policing within our organization has been our chief, Tai Trong, and for that we are incredibly grateful. In addition to the chief, on the screen, you'll see actual snippets from emails demonstrating times when EBP was intentionally brought into conversations that we may otherwise not have known were happening. And those moments matter. These are the leaders and colleagues who understand the value of evidence-based approaches and who help keep EBP relevant. They're the people who speak up in meetings, connect us to projects, and help others see the practical value of our unit. When you have advocates like that throughout the organization, it creates momentum and it helps to build that credibility further. This is a critical step towards institutionalizing EBP, which can't be achieved solely through producing good work. It's about building a network of supporters who carry the message forward, create opportunities for EBP to contribute, and help ensure that evidence-informed thinking is reflected in decisions at every level of the organization. And if I can actually just revisit a slide from earlier, let's bring Kramer back into the mix. When you have that kind of support, this is what starts to happen. You start getting more requests for EBP involvement, and evidence-based thinking begins showing up across different projects in different areas. And this is also a sign that EBP is becoming institutionalized within an organization. And so if you can focus on building the right team, bridging the gap between knowing and doing, providing training, creating the demand, and having those internal advocates, that combination creates an environment where EBP really begins to take hold. But it can't all be sunshine and rainbows. And one of the most challenging parts of this work is something we haven't talked about yet. And for that, I'd like to introduce you to the policing buzzword bingo. If I had a nickel for every time I've seen terms like data-driven or actionable insights in a project proposal, I'd probably be retired by now. The reality is that as EBP becomes more popular, the language starts showing up everywhere. And that can be a good thing, but it also can create some challenges. And AI certainly hasn't helped in this regard. We've seen projects described as successful before any evaluation has taken place. We've also seen tactics labeled as evidence-based when the research suggests otherwise. And so part of our role is helping protect the meaning behind these terms. That includes reviewing reports, providing feedback, and respectfully correcting terminology when it doesn't align with the evidence. It's about helping people understand the difference between being informed by evidence and simply using the language. And as uncomfortable as those conversations can sometimes be, they're important. If we want evidence-based policing to continue maturing as a profession, we have to protect the integrity of the language, methods, and standards behind it. Evidence-based medicine didn't earn its credibility overnight. It earned it by maintaining rigorous standards around what could legitimately be called evidence-based. And the same will be true for policing. I'm now going to turn it back over to Sarah, who will walk you through some EBP resources and tips for getting started.
Thanks, Missy. So now you're probably wondering, how does someone get started if they want to be involved in an EBP unit or even just an EBP project? And so a great place to start is using Google Scholar. It's great because it compiles academic journals into one place. A lot of university libraries also have this functionality, but if you're no longer a student, Google Scholar is a great user-friendly way to search for articles in your area of interest. You might find that you need to pay for access, though, to certain articles, which brings me to the next great resource, which is Applied Police Briefings, which is free. And many of you are likely familiar with Applied Police Briefings. Our co-hosts today are the editors of that, and it is great at taking the scholarly articles and making them digestible and applicable to those in policing agencies. Other helpful resources include the College of Policing's Crime Reduction Toolkit, the Arizona State University's POP Guide, and the Evidence-Based Policing Matrix from George Mason University. These are valuable because they translate research into practical guidance. So the Crime Reduction Toolkit summarizes what works, what doesn't, and the strength of the evidence behind the strategies. It makes it easy to apply research in real time. The Arizona State University POP Guide provides support for many different problems using the problem-oriented policing framework, helping to ensure that responses are aligned with best practices. And lastly, the Evidence-Based Policing Matrix organizes thousands of studies to show which types of strategies are most evidence-based, most effective based on target, approach, and mechanism. It recently underwent another great transformation and continues to be an invaluable tool for finding research. Together, these tools help to bridge the gap between research and practice, and they give us accessible ways to guide evidence-based policing strategies. Internally, these are some of the key tools that on the analysis side I regularly rely on. So we frequently use internal dashboards, and we work very closely with our business analytics unit, who extract back-end data from calls for service and occurrence data and translate that into accessible reports and dashboards that support our analysis. We also frequently use ArcGIS for spatial analysis, including mapping hotspots and harm spots, as well as working with geographic data such as traffic patterns. For statistical analysis, I primarily use SPSS, although I know R is becoming a lot more common. The key point is just having some access to a platform that supports advanced analytical work, because despite what my undergraduate stats classes tried to tell me, you will never need to do an ANOVA by hand. And Excel also remains an essential tool for managing data, conducting basic level analyses, and producing reports. And lastly, we often use surveys in our unit to gather feedback. So having access to platforms like SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics is beneficial for collecting and analyzing that information. So as we near the end of our presentation, we would like to show you an LPS example of EBP in practice. So this is a triple T example. For this example, I'm going to walk you through in a minute. It's important that you understand the concept of harm in this context. So from research, we have learned that all crimes are not created equally. For example, imagine a neighborhood experiencing 10 thefts from cars in a month, compared to one aggravated assault. If we look purely at volume, the theft seems like the bigger problem. But research shows that not all crimes carry the same level of harm. The single aggravated assault has a far greater impact on the victim and community feelings of safety than the thefts combined. Evidence-based policing pushes us to go beyond just counting incidents and instead consider severity, impact, and harm when prioritizing where we should focus our efforts. Much like when you attend the emergency room at a hospital, not all cases are treated equally. There is a triaging for the most severe cases, which is similar to what a harm score attempts to do. So one way in Canada that we can turn ourselves towards harm and crime severity is by using the Canadian Crime Severity Index. Using the Crime Severity Index, or CSI, which was developed by Stats Canada, we can weight occurrences based on their UCR. Each UCR, or crime type, is assigned a seriousness weight. The weights are derived from actual sentences handed down by courts in all provinces and territories. More serious crimes are assigned higher weights, less serious offenses have lower weights. The specific weights are calculated from two parts. The first part is the incarceration rate for that offense type. This is the proportion of people convicted of the offense who are sentenced to time in prison. And the second part is the average mean length of the prison sentence in days for that specific type of offense. So as you can see from the table, murder holds a weight of 8,300, while disturb the peace is around 12. Excuse me. To demonstrate this further, here's how many agencies report on crime. Using just volume, you can see that there are a lot of thefts, and therefore the attention may be on that large number or the fluctuations around that number. But evidence-based policing instead says we should focus on harm and the more serious offenses, such as homicide, like shown here, when you take the crime severity lens. If you're only looking at volume, the stats can be a bit misleading. Harm also often follows the 80-20 rule, which is also called the Pareto principle. It's a principle that suggests that a small proportion of causes account for the majority of outcomes. Put another way, it's that there is an unequal concentration of something. In harm and policing, this means a small number of locations contribute a disproportionate share of harm, which circles back to our project that focused on 2 high harm locations in our city. So we pulled the data to look at the highest harm locations in the city. We then selected 2 different locations. Although they were both high harm, they were different in many ways. One was old and has been high harm for a while the other was a newer building that has had increasing concerns. One was an apartment complex, the other was a townhouse complex. One was in the north end and one was in the south end. So we worked with our community-oriented response unit to implement the strategy. It utilized a variety of evidence-based strategies, including hotspotting, crime prevention through environmental design, community building with residents and community agencies nearby, bail checks, and more. The officers tracked their outputs daily using forms. The project was evaluated after about 6 months. The bars on this graph show the occurrence counts, while the red line shows the cumulative harm score. The far left shows the harm and counts for the 6-month project period in the previous year. The middle shows for the 6 months directly prior to the project starting, and the right shows during the 6-month project period. This is Site A, the location that was newer for being high harm. We found that during the project, occurrence counts were still high while harm dropped substantially. Although we can't be sure of the exact reason for this outcome, we speculate that the increased presence drew more reports for low harm crimes, but reduced the frequency of high harm crimes. For Site B, the townhouse complex that has been high harm for years, we actually saw a decrease in both harm and frequency of occurrences. We chose this example because it demonstrates a completely internal project that was designed by the evidence-based policing unit and implemented by an operational unit. It was tracked throughout and showed moderate effects. It is also something that is fairly easy to do. The unit was not spending all of their time there, but rather they were random and intermittent, much like hotspotting, to try and be unpredictable. It wasn't an overly resource-heavy project, as this unit has many other demands placed on them, and they did what they could when they could. Missy and I were recently at the American Society for Evidence-Based Policing conference in Washington, D.C., and we got to hear an EBP legend, Dr. Cynthia Lum, speak. And in her presentation, she mentioned how you don't need to have a PhD and do randomized control trials all the time to do EBP. Instead, what we need is people operationalizing it and evaluating it on the ground. And we like to think that this is a good example of just that. And so to wrap it up, I'll pass it back to you, Missy.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. So we also think what's brought us here today, it's important to connect this discussion back into the context of 30 Forward and how EBP principles can assist in its advancement as well. So as an example, at the London Police Service, we examined retention among sworn members across a variety of demographic factors, which included gender. And in our case, luckily, we did not identify evidence of a systemic retention issue when it relates to gender. But the more important point may not be necessarily what we found, it's that we asked the question. And so we say to all of you, just in the context again of 30 Forward, do you know what retention looks like in your organization? Are there differences in who stays, who leaves, who gets promoted, or who perhaps moves into leadership roles? And could those factors be affecting your ability to achieve your 30 Forward goals in your organization? And I say this to you because this is just one small example of how you could apply an evidence-based initiative in your own service, in your own organization that is 30 Forward related. Because the reality is you won't know the answer to those questions until you look. And that's the essence of evidence-based policing, being curious, examining your data, and using evidence to guide decisions. Sometimes the evidence confirms a concern you may have already had. Sometimes it challenges our assumptions. And either way, it helps us to move from opinion to then informed action. And so as we kind of close here today, and we're going to transition into questions, Sarah and I want to leave you with these two quotes and two simple thoughts we have on how to broadly move EBP forward. And so the first one is to start. Just simply to start. You don't need to wait for the perfect project, the perfect data set, or the perfect moment. Start where you are with what you have and take that first step toward developing evidence-based policing at your service. And then finally, remember, you can't eat an elephant in one bite. Meaningful change happens one step at a time. I hope we made that clear with our journey and how it's kind of evolved over the years. But if you get started, you'll be further ahead tomorrow than you are today. And those small steps taken consistently can transform an organization. And so the future of policing will be shaped by those who are willing to ask questions, to seek evidence, and act on what they learn. And we really hope that that will include all of you. We're incredibly grateful for your time and listening to Sarah and I today. I think we'll now turn it back over to our moderators for the Q&A portion of the presentation.
Excellent. Thanks so much for a wonderful presentation. Lots of important insights. I invite the attendees to start posting their questions in the chat room. We have one right now. I'll pose it to both of you, and you can decide amongst yourselves which one wants to answer, or you can both weigh in. So the first question, how do you integrate Ontario's mobilization and engagement model into your unit?
I can take that one. That might be a more overarching theme that is dealt by. We have a secondary planning and research committee, so that's not a model that we actively integrate, Sarah, unless you feel differently. That would be for another area of the organization.
Yeah, I'm unaware of that model.
As a frontline officer, I can agree that it takes time for people to adapt to new ideas on the road. Outside of extra training, has any other methods been considered by your unit?
Hi, Tyler. Tyler works for us, so this is good. He's putting some pressure on us. I think a hurdle is that there is resource scarcity in policing globally. So training is the best way that we can assure that we have those resources available to us on those days. They block that time out of their schedules for officers on the front line to be able to come and listen. Because one of the bigger hurdles with newer officers is that they're often assigned to the road and they don't have as much flexibility in their day-to-day operations to be able to go and take on evidence-based projects. So my advice often to younger officers is to let us know that you're interested. But like the example with the project that we did with the community-oriented response unit, that's a great way to try and get your foot in the door, because they're often a really great resource that we can tap into to do EBP initiatives. And if you let them know they're interested on that more ad hoc basis, perhaps you can come along with them when they are going to these high harm locations and start to learn more about it. Yeah, resource scarcity is definitely a challenge, and we would like to be able to do more with frontline officers. It's just not within our capabilities currently.
Clint, can you please comment on any partnerships that the LPS has with other outside agencies or academics, academic groups slash specialists?
I can take this
Sarah,
one,
do you want
Missy,
to
if
take
you
that
want.
one?
Sure. So some of them that we currently have, we are working with the Center for Research and Education. I'm sorry, I'm going to batter this. Center for Research and Education for Violence Against Women and Children out of Western University. We have a partnership with them. We have a partnership with a consulting company called Sigma Research. We've also partnered in the past. We've done work with Carleton University. We are exploring currently a partnership potentially with Simon Fraser University. Missy, I feel like I'm missing one. Guelph Humber, we've also partnered with. So the scope of the different projects varies. And so sometimes it's a matter of consulting with these academic institutions, and sometimes it's a matter of providing them with our data to do specific analyses as well. So it really varies on what we're working on, what our partnerships look like.
Thank you. I'll ask the question because I love Seinfeld, so I was immediately drawn to the Kramer slide. It's wonderful to see how many projects are coming your ways, or conversations around projects. A lot of stuff on that slide. How do you decide how to prioritize what projects you take on?
Sometimes the organization does that for us. We definitely are very closely aligned with our strategic plan and the policing priorities that are also brought to us by our community. But I think what we kind of tried to touch on is in creating that demand. We are about to be a team of 5, and so we really don't like to say no. We really we like to have in-person meetings. We feel like that's better than trying to gauge things through email. That'll be the start of it, but then we really suggest meeting in person. And then not all of those are huge overarching start to end finishes. Even if we can just help people with tracking. Remember, Sarah was talking about the triple T and tracking, what outputs related to what outcomes is often the most forgotten. So even if we can help people come up with a really simple form or an Excel spreadsheet to make it easier for them to run with it, with more of like secondary guidance from us rather than us being like the overarching body in the organization that is leading the charge. You have to triage, I guess. It's a triaging system. It's not perfect, but we do the best that we can. Sarah, you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think that's completely accurate. And sometimes it really is just an email. I know I had a request less than 2 weeks ago, and they didn't even know necessarily kind of what they were looking for. So I just pulled together a quick email in like an hour that pulled together what the research in the area looks like, and where I would recommend they kind of take it for the next steps. And then if it circles back to us, it does, and sometimes it doesn't. And so, yeah.
And I think it's a good opportunity just to add for sometimes course correction. And again, having those respectful conversations, because there are times when we find out a project happened after the fact and now they want an evaluation. And, that post hoc is not great. So while we still will always assist, we then try and use that as an opportunity to explain how we could better assist, which I think comes back to training and the importance of training and just a really great recognition about what we do. Someone the other day asked me, we're getting this new evidence collection, like I'm talking about physical tangible way that evidence will be collected in the organization. And they thought that that was coming to us. And so immediately I use that as an opportunity to re-engage and explain that, we are not the forensic identification unit. We are not doing physical evidence. So it's a lot of discussions around that and context and just trying to really create a deep understanding of what we do.
There's a comment and a question from the same person. I'll read the comment because you may have reflections on this because I hear this frequently. So to avoid paying for scholarly articles, one can contact the author directly. The vast majority are keen to share their research and will provide a PDF copy for free. Any reflections on that? I certainly hear that from a lot of frontline officers. They're interested in the research, but they simply can't access it. Obviously, you've identified Google Scholar, which often has PDFs, but sometimes not, and you've identified applied police briefings. Any other advice if police officers are struggling to access research that they're interested in?
This is actually something, oh, sorry.
No, you go, Sarah, you go.
This is actually something I have told people as well before, is to contact the authors, because I find that, yeah, you're right. Like most of the time they are willing to share their information. Excuse me. We're also fortunate that currently we do have a member in our unit who's in school, so they're able to access things through their library. But yeah, definitely reaching out to the authors is a great tool.
Excellent. And just from the same person, so I may as well deal with it at the same time. And how do you deal with research ethics issues?
Well, yeah, we have a process for going through that. Both we work internally within our organization and our legal, but also if we're pairing with an academic institution, we have to go through their REB as well. So it's a collaborative endeavor where we make sure that everyone is on the same page, especially with, we've talked a lot about things that you can do internally. But there are a lot of external organizations and agencies that want to pair with a police organization because we have access to this data that is so rich and that they would like. But obviously, we're very careful when it comes to anonymizing everything when appropriate. And that's when we really work with our legal team, and any sort of external partnership would have to be passed through that chain and that umbrella.
Thanks so much. Going back to the question about how you prioritize research projects, can you give any examples of something that you had to say no way to, and maybe the reasons why you had to decline?
Do you want me to take that one, or you, Sarah?
You can go ahead.
Okay, I think it comes back to that police buzzword bingo. And when we get a project proposal that is riddled with terminology, but is not in any facet going to be evidence-based. Like, we are not a catch-all to assist every person on every project that come across the organization. And some things are quick hits. If somebody comes with something that they are looking to do, of course, being an evidence-based policing unit, we will go and look at what the research says. And so if it is opposing to the tactic that they are planning to use, that doesn't mean that operationally it might not be something that still wants to be pushed ahead, but we just have to be really clear in our language that it is not an initiative that we are going to say in any capacity is evidence-based at this point. And I guess that just comes back to really like protecting the terminology. And absolutely, Superintendent Harvey, we do have those requests. We have those requests, and we have to have broad shoulders and say no.
Thanks so much. We have 2 minutes left. Maybe I'll turn to Kirk if you have a question.
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in with a question. So it's for both of you, but Sarah, you had mentioned that tracking is kind of often where the process tends to fall through. I guess a double part. So why do you think that's the case, and what can we do better in that regard?
I think it's the case for multiple reasons. I think one of it is it's not traditional policing. It's not what you signed up for. Most officers did not envision themselves collecting data and filling out directed patrol pages or occurrences about what they've done. And so tracking the outputs of what they're doing is again just kind of out of scope. And so stressing the importance and what it's used for is very important. So I think that's part of the reason it gets overlooked. And also just for things like the queue and just busyness, right? People are so busy they forget what they've done. Oh yeah, I was out hotspotting an hour and a half ago. Like what time was it again? And so anybody who's seen my presentation on hotspots knows that I really try to make things as automated as possible so that when we are doing tracking, we can rely on the data being as clean as possible because it's just not something that's done well or accurately most of the time.
Excellent. All right. That brings us to, I know we have one more question, but it brings us to the end of our hour. I know that you put I think you put your emails up on the last slide. Is that where your emails included? So I don't know if you want to share that slide again once we close, but if you have additional questions, please feel free to email either Missy or Sarah, and they'll get back to you. I want to thank, obviously, our presenters. It was a wonderful presentation. You're both you're great presenters, so articulate, and I love the practical strategies that you focused on. The emails are up here, so if we've missed your question, please email Sarah and Missy. So thank you again. I want to thank everyone that attended this presentation and spending time with us this afternoon. With that, I will draw it to a close. Thanks very much, everyone, and have a good day.